We are all accustomed to hearing that after the end of mortal existence, an amazing world of the afterlife opens up before a person. But in fact, everything is not as rosy as we would like. There is something that many prefer not to talk about, deliberately keeping silent about the shocking facts and realities that may await us on the other side of biological existence. Watch this video to the end, and you will find out what goosebump-inducing revelations were shared by those who visited beyond our world, and why some people return to life screaming. Many doctors, constantly faced with the death of patients, are forced to become cynical, not prone to sentimentality with those who leave this world. They often answer, absolutely nothing. He just becomes flower fertilizer. Once, the same opinion was held by Dr. Rawlings Moritz, a resuscitator and MD, president of the Institute of Cardiology of the state of Tennessee, and former personal physician of U.S. President Eisenhower. For almost 20 years, he was engaged in the noble cause of bringing people back from the other world. For a long time, he was drawn by the question of what happens to people on the other side of life. He basically did not believe in any afterlife. But everything changed after one incident that radically transformed not only his worldview, but also completely altered the direction of his career, forcing him to closely study what is called a posthumous experience. A middle-aged patient was admitted to intensive care whose heart had stopped. At first, everything happened according to the doctor's usual routine. He began carrying out the necessary procedures to save the man. For him, it was routine work. But what happened later? Dr. Rawlings Moritz described as follows. After carrying out all the appropriate actions, the patient finally regained consciousness, but looked extremely frightened. He was shaking with horror and kept repeating, "Doctor, don't let me go back there again." If the patient had not been so weakened, he probably would have screamed with fear. For the first time, I saw such a terrified person who had been on the other side of life. Usually, people after resuscitation are either confused, too exhausted, or grateful for salvation. But such panic I had never seen before. This reaction to resurrection greatly puzzled the cardiologist. Consumed with curiosity, he couldn't help but ask what had caused such a violent reaction. The patient explained that after death, he had fallen into some kind of hole where it was dark and unbearably lonely. The man couldn't finish his story. He was shaking with fear again, sweating, and begging the doctor not to let him go back to that terrible place. Yet even such an emotional answer didn't initially impress the doctor too much. He thought it was just a strange reaction to stress. After all, the man had experienced clinical death, and that might have been the end of it. But a few days later, Dr. Moritz visited the patient again to monitor his health, and once more asked about the frightening visions. To the doctor's surprise, the patient replied sincerely that he remembered nothing of the sort. "Sorry, doctor, but what are you talking about? I don't remember anything that could scare me. On the contrary, I met an amazing and kind woman, about 20, very beautiful and sweet. She introduced herself as my mother. But that can't be true. My real mother looks completely different." After such a reply, Dr. Moritz was even more puzzled. Not only did the resurrected patient now deny his terrifying visions, but the rest of his story raised new questions. Without informing the patient, the doctor contacted his father and described what the patient had seen. The father's response stunned the cardiologist for the third time. It turned out the patient's father had been married twice. His first wife, the biological mother of the patient, had died long ago. Not wanting to traumatize his son, he never told him about it, and soon remarried. The woman described by the patient matched the appearance of his biological mother, whom he had never seen and about whom he knew nothing, not even through photographs. This case made an indelible impression on Dr. Rawlings Moritz, forcing him to seriously reconsider what happens after death. From that point on, he began to question patients in detail about what they experienced at the moment when doctors were fighting for their lives. Thanks to these studies, the doctor came to the conclusion that there is life beyond death. But unlike other research that includes only positive memories of the afterlife, Dr. Moritz also collected testimonies from patients that cannot be classified as pleasant. On the contrary, they are frightening and force us to treat the experience of the afterlife more critically, reminding us even of hell and the torments of sinners. He concluded that not everyone will experience something pleasant after death. There is no doubt about this. Dr. Moritz conducted countless interviews and experiments, saying, "I interviewed everyone. About 20% of those resuscitated agreed to talk about their experiences from the other world. These descriptions saved me from the darkness of ignorance and skepticism. They led me to the conviction that there is life beyond death. More than once I witnessed that the dead could see and hear doctors in the ward. This is easy to verify. There is no doubt they really perceive everything around them when the beating of life stops in their body." He noted that living people suffer from a kind of spiritual blindness to the invisible world, while the perception of the so-called dead expands. The doctor also made another interesting observation. If you ask a patient immediately after resuscitation, you're more likely to hear about frightening experiences of death, not a peaceful transition to another world. According to the cardiologist, over time, such disturbing and painful experiences are pushed into the subconscious. In conscious memory, either only pleasant fragments remain or nothing at all. That's why, at first glance, life after death may seem like paradise. But in reality, this is not always the case. According to those who survived clinical death and were revived, the departure to the spiritual world usually begins with the deceased seeing their own body from which life has left, while still being able to hear and see everything happening around them. Then, the soul leaves the place of death, flying into a dark corridor. However, not everyone's flight ends in light. A considerable number reported finding themselves in a dark cave or at the bottom of a deep hole where it was cold and gloomy. Everything was shrouded in fog. The people living in those areas resembled shadows that exuded horror and doom. There was emptiness, apathy, and hopelessness in that place. Some even admitted they tried to escape, but felt a certain unbearable burden like a heavy stone preventing them from leaving this abode of darkness. They quickly realized that their own sins had trapped them in the dark sphere. The weight of their sins literally pressed on them, preventing them from leaving hell. Naturally, few who experience this frightening ordeal are willing to talk about it, because it speaks very unpleasantly of them. These terrifying memories are pushed out of consciousness. That is why the testimonies shared by patients immediately after resurrection are so important, before they've had time to fully comprehend what happened and put up psychological defenses. At the end of his life, Dr. Rawlings Moritz said, "Throughout the history of mankind, mystics have spoken of life after death, but only now, thanks to modern technology, are we truly beginning to penetrate this great mystery. Perhaps existence after death is not only a mystery, but also the hope of mankind." The unusual encounters experienced by his patients had the most profound impact on them and changed their attitudes toward life and what comes after. I have not met a single patient who, having experienced this, remained an atheist. As with any such example, everyone has the right to choose what to believe in and what not. But if this is true, then some of us should think carefully about our actions before it is too late to correct those that may carry the soul into the terrible realms of the afterlife. Write in the comments what you think about this, and also like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new, interesting videos on various mystical topics. Thank you very much for watching. All the best, and may goodness be with you.